Good evening and welcome to our webinar, which is all about part of our Study in the USA USA webinar series. And today's topic will be about external scholarships. We'll be getting started very shortly, but just encouraging everyone to make sure that you can hear us and that your sound is ready to go. We are really excited to have two amazing panelists joining us for today's webinar. We've got Henry Stevens from the Morehead-Cain Foundation and Ben Skipper from the Jefferson Scholars program. So we're super excited to dig in a bit more about finding money to help you study in the United States. Before we get started, I'm going to just explain who I am and a little bit about us. My name's Rowena. I'm an Education USA advisor here at the Fulbright Commission. We will be taking questions at the end of this webinar. So if you do have any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A box, not the chat box, and we will answer those at the end. So I'll be encouraging Ben and Henry to take any of those questions, and I'm happy to take anything as well. We'll also be recording this webinar, so we will be sending it to everybody who registered for this event. So if you do need to finish up early, then that's absolutely fine. Okay, so moving on a little bit. Just a little bit about who we are as an organisation. We are from the Fulbright Commission. Fulbright was set up about 70 years ago by Senator Fulbright, an American senator who had this grand plan to help bridge cultural and educational divides between people of the United States and people of other countries. His grand plan included postgraduate scholarships for people from the US to go to other countries and people from those other countries to go to the US. So now, as the UK branch of the Fulbright program, we offer graduate scholarships now here in 2019. We're funded by both the US and the UK government to deliver these scholarships. We're also the Education USA Advising Centre for the United Kingdom. So as part of this mission, we offer free, unbiased advice to anyone who's interested in studying in the United States. We are paid for by the State Department, and we will always give real, honest advice about how to make your dreams of studying in the US happen. And so we are part of this network of advisors all over the world and always happy to help. We've got our website, which is full of advice for any British student looking to apply on any aspect of US applications. So please do make use of that resource. So I just wanted to jump in. Today's webinar is going to be particularly focusing on an area we get so many questions about, which is all about funding US study. And just to help explain how this all works together, just so that you know how this piece of funding works. US universities do expect families to contribute what they can to their child's study. And so many US universities will be expecting a family to contribute money towards the cost of both the tuition, but also the cost of living at the university. So that's one area as you think about funding US study to think about. Also available to UK students is to discover whether the university itself has funding available. Many British students find this a really valuable source of information and funding, and this can be financial in the form of financial aid. Lots of US universities do offer this money to international students, but it's worth being selective in terms of where you're applying and making sure that you're looking at whether you're eligible for funding. So having a look at the US university websites, do they offer financial aid and what basis is it offered on? Is it about the money that you need because you are perhaps from a low or middle income family? Do they offer money based on the means you have available? Or is it based on perhaps particular talents or abilities that you have, maybe your academics? Universities can also offer merit scholarships. Then you can also have a look at an area that we're going to be talking a lot about today, these external funding bodies. So these are bodies separate to the university that offer scholarships to British students and can be a really great way of helping to fund either some or all of the study in the United States. And then finally, another area you can look at is loans to finance your study in the US. Unfortunately, you can't take the UK student loan if you are eligible for one of those. You can't take it abroad. So it becomes important that you're exploring all your funding options and exploring what's available. And I'd always suggest doing that before you start to look at commercial bank loans, just because they tend to not be super student friendly. So just to cover a little bit more about this idea of external scholarships. So external scholarships come from external funding bodies, and they can include all sorts of professional bodies, charitable bodies, sometimes companies willing to sponsor talented, amazing students to study at either a particular university or any university in the US. They often have a particular funding criteria, so it might be that you are a good fit for some of those different scholarships, and those criteria often reflect the mission of the organisation that is sponsoring them. Sometimes those criteria can be very niche, and sometimes they can be fairly wide, so it's worth having a think through those. And there are loads of different funding bodies out there, so it's always worth being open-minded as you look at those. And we'll just drop through how you might start to explore some of those scholarships through your research of US universities. So in terms of finding those scholarships, where can you find them? How can you look for them? And the first thing is you can use special search engines that are designed to find scholarships. And these, we've got lots of links to them on pages on our website. So if you have a look at the external funding bodies page on our website, Fulbright.org.uk, we have lots of links off. These search engines are often built for Americans, so you might need to just adjust sometimes your terminology. They won't necessarily be asking about things like GCSEs, but they can throw up all sorts of opportunities and things to have a look at. You'll also, as you're looking at your different US universities, you can also start to check their financial aid pages, and this can be a really great way to find really great scholarships. The university itself may well link to funding opportunities that fund a scholarship at their university. So it might not be offered by them, but they may be pointing you towards those scholarships. So it's really worth doing your homework, doing your research, as with anything applying to US universities, looking for those different scholarship listings. And then what you'll also find is that some scholarships offered by external funding bodies can be really small, maybe $3,000 or $4,000, and maybe they're just a one-off $2,000 or $3,000, which might be great in terms of starting to perhaps fund an air flight to the US, but they're maybe not going to make big inroads into your cost of your tuition and your living costs. However, there are some really big scholarships out there, and so they sometimes can be really generous and cover the full cost of both perhaps the tuition of the university throughout your degree, your undergraduate degree, but they may even make a contribution towards living costs as well. So just being aware that the small scholarships are great, but you might not find that they're able to cover the entire cost of the degree. I just want to point out some of the very large external scholarships which are open to British students. And these are just some of the examples. There are more out there that you can perhaps look at. And these are all very selective universities. They're some of the top US universities which have these external funding bodies willing to fund students from the UK. So having a look at things like stamp scholarships at Georgia Tech, Jefferson Scholarship at University of Virginia, and we're going to be hearing from Ben shortly on that. Morehead-Cain Scholarship at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. We'll hear from Henry in a moment. Robertson Scholarships at Duke University and also UNC Chapel Hill, and the Emory Scholars Program at Emory University. Other ones available, Belk Scholarship at Davidson College, the Hesburgh UCASO Scholars Program at the University of Notre Dame, the Johnson Scholarship Program at Washington and Lee, and the Honorary Scholars Program at Washington University in St. Louis. So these are just some of the examples of kind of large scholarships which are going to make big inroads into both the cost of tuition, but also the living costs available as well. So they're a really great source of amazing scholarships. They're highly competitive scholarships to get into, but they are open to British students and they are looking for British applicants. And my suggestion to you would be that some of these not as many British students are applying to, and that if you don't apply, then you're definitely not going to get the scholarship. So other tips that I would have about thinking about these scholarships is, first of all, just checking, are you eligible for these scholarships? So sometimes they have particular criteria, which may be a good fit for you, or it may not be such a good fit. Perhaps your academic field of interest isn't quite in line with what they're looking for. Maybe your profile, your leadership profile isn't quite in line with what they're looking for. Maybe you need to live in a part of the UK. Perhaps it's only open to Welsh students. Having a look at the eligibility, are you a good fit for a particular scholarship? And then also just thinking about niche criteria. So some scholarships are super specific. So you'll find sometimes these scholarships are awarded by perhaps a foundation or a trust to support women engineers at a particular university. If you are a female identifying engineer, this could be the scholarship for you. You may even find that there is even more niche criteria than that. So sometimes you'll see something like scholarships for Polish women engineers. If you are a Polish woman engineer, this is a perfect scholarship for you. So just making sure that you're maximizing your any niche criteria, anything that is open to you can be really important when you're looking at different scholarships. And remember that you can stack those scholarships. So especially if you're looking at small scholarships, you can apply for several scholarships and see if you can start to grow the money that you're accessing. And then the other thing that I just say is, and I'm sure that many of you will have been to our seminars either online or in person where we've talked about financial aid and this needs-based financial aid. If you have complicated family situations, so perhaps you don't qualify, your family's income means that you don't qualify for any kind of need-based aid, or perhaps you have parents who are living separately and there's kind of complicated situations involved, then sometimes these big scholarships can be really great to help meet the cost of attending a US university. So just bearing that in mind, and I'm very happy to take questions at the end about how this works. Just finally, I just want to pick up on some of the advantages of external scholarships. So obviously a huge advantage of one of these big external scholarships is that it can provide amazing funding towards the cost of attending a US university, both in terms of tuition, but also in terms of living costs. So that's your room in your dorm room, your meal plan, perhaps even contributions towards travel costs, student activities fees, and sometimes even travel to and from the university. So these can be incredible funding opportunities, but there's also some other amazing benefits for some of the scholarships. So understanding that these awards can be incredibly prestigious, really add to your CV, to your not just getting admitted to one of these universities, but also being made a scholarship is a real a scholar of one of these scholarships can be an incredibly prestigious thing, and lots of honor comes with it. It also can offer opportunities to get involved in perhaps special honors colleges or special programs. So sometimes scholarships will allow, you're a scholar, a recipient of a scholarship, it will allow you to register for classes before everybody else does. That's definitely some of the bonuses of some of the scholarships available. And they also have often their own alumni networks. So beyond the university's alumni network, some of these big scholarships have really active alumni communities who are really keen to support the younger scholars coming in, and can be really great for progressing career networks, research networks, and so on. And then finally, often these scholarships, especially the larger ones, can be really great for funding amazing experiences that can just put the the icing on the cake of your American experience. So these can be funded internships. Some of them offer summer travel and leadership opportunities, or opportunities to get involved in research. And we'll hear from Ben and Henry a little bit more about the offers of the scholarships that they offer in this area. So just being aware that there's lots of advantages at looking at external scholarships, and just really making sure that you're making the most of these opportunities. So I'm going to hand over now to Ben, who is dialing in from the US. And he is going to talk a little bit more about the opportunities and the process for how do you go about getting one of these scholarships. So Ben, I'm going to pass over to you if you'd like to introduce yourself and go from there.
Thank you so much, Rowena. Hi, everybody. This is Ben Skipper, and I'm with the Jefferson Scholars Foundation, which is an affiliated organization with the University of Virginia. And we steward the Jefferson Scholarship program designed to attract students to the university itself through a full merit-based program. We'll talk more about the scholarship at the end of my time, but I did want to give you a little bit of an insight into maybe some tips and tricks about how you might go about finding and getting organized around the scholarship opportunities, and then going through the processes themselves. One thing I'd like to add to all the good content Rowena provided was, not only should you be looking at external scholarships or available scholarships at the universities that you're interested in over the next, for the entry into those schools as well. But once you decide on a college or a university, make sure you go ahead and look around at other opportunities that the school might have or university might have itself for the students who are in their second, third, or even fourth year of study. Oftentimes, the most difficult year to find money is the entry year into a college or a university, and especially those niche awards can be found through alumni associations or other networks, or sometimes they'll have scholarship offices and individuals. There's a support network already in existence to help you find additional support to make sure that your 4 years at whatever the U.S. university might be will be fully enriched. So, Rowena, with that, I think we're good to go to the next slide. So none of this is rocket science, but it is, I think, a good practice for you to go through. And oftentimes I know my own children and scholars that I've worked with said, "Oh, I've got this under control, Mr. Skipper. It's all up here." There's just a wealth of information. As soon as you start going through the websites that are available via Fulbright, et cetera, if you go to the Stamped Scholars Program, they have 30 different programs that there are universities that they work with. So getting organized, while fairly straightforward and simple, is one of the most important steps as you move forward into this process. I recommend utilizing whatever spreadsheet or table creator that suits your fancy, but go ahead and start listing out as you're finding scholarships that you think might be interesting to you or that you are actually eligible for, including some basic information about them. It doesn't have to be exhaustive at the start, and as you move further into the different selection processes, you can easily add columns and get more information. But what you're trying to do is give yourself context to the places that you're interested in, the opportunities that might be available to you. So a great way to start is looking at the school list that you've already created. Here are the places that I'm interested in attending. What are their opportunities there? And then also think about the affinities that you have. What are your academic interests or other ways that you want to get involved in university? And those might be good filters and search terms to start adding to your list. Important things to pay attention to are what is required for each individual process. For both the Jefferson Scholars and the Morehead-Cain, there's a separate application process different from the standard university application. And in some cases, they are pulled directly from your admissions application to the school itself. So this is all information that is good for you to do some pre-work on, so that you're not caught unawares later on in the process and potentially having missed out on an opportunity. I did put a note in there about deadlines as well. Typically, the deadlines won't, if you miss a deadline, it's not always an automatic disqualifier, but you don't want to push those boundaries or limits. There are many qualified students who will be looking out for these types of opportunities And those who have hit the marks at each point from just basic organization, it's always in your best interest to do so. So things that I would continue to add, additional columns in the future beyond just the basis of application type and deadline and the notes that you take yourselves. In the future, you might want to add things like criteria, and how long it's available for. Is it a one-year scholarship, or is it for all years that I'm enrolled at the university, et cetera? But that's up to your personal preference as you get later on. Next slide. Another thing, as you've created your list at this point, and you have an idea of starting to dive into the scholarships that you'd like to pursue. It's a good idea to get to know what those scholarships selection processes require of you, both in terms of the time, energy, and sometimes you can be, the more you're aware of what is about to be in front of you, the better you can do to synergize some of the effort that you're already putting into collegiate applications, et cetera, from types of essays and short answer responses. There is an opportunity for you to not have to do duplicative work throughout the process itself. When you are looking at the selection processes, it's worth making sure you know what the distinctive features are for each process itself. Is there an interview required? Is it a group interview, or is it an individual interview? So those are the things to get yourself familiar with. In terms of the general timeline and requirements, those are fairly straightforward and easily found via websites, especially the websites of the entities themselves. I recommend you use them as a primary resource. I do put in a note in there to be careful of the crowdsourced websites. These are the College Confidentials and the Reddit. And I would like to think that everybody always works with the best of intentions and always full information, but sometimes they can put misleading information, or it's inaccurate, or just maybe out of date. So it's a great place if you're looking for some demystification and a place to start, but I always ask that you glean whatever information, but verify with the entities directly themselves before you make assumptions about a process. An example here would be, we had as a part of our selection process, we have a math exam in the final stage that students take, and it's more of a creative exercise. And on a website somewhere, somebody said, "Oh, you don't have to take that seriously, just write poetry." Well, I can confirm now that if you write poetry during that portion of the exam, you will get zero, you will not get full credit for that piece. So while your peers and others may present themselves as resources, they may be not the best resource for some of that. And keep in mind, the processes have been developed over a number of years for these organizations in most part. And because they know what the criteria is and what they're trying to get out of the process from identifying individuals, know that the application process is tailored to that. So for you, it might seem like busy work or a hoop to jump through, or it might be frustrating, but know that there's a specific reason for that. And I can assure you, none of the organizations that you're going to talk to today or have been presented thus far in the presentation are trying to weed people out through pure busy work and attrition. We are all trying to help you find the best university for you from a fit standpoint, as well as where possible to help defer some of those costs or eliminate some of those costs for you as well. But again, the big takeaway from this slide is if you do have any questions, make sure you contact the scholarship entity directly. They're more than willing to help you out. And a side note to that is I would also encourage you as the student to be the one reaching out to the scholarship entity itself. Part of this process is the transition from a paid and family created support network for you to developing your own networks. And so the best thing you can do for yourself is not have your mother call me or your father call me or legal guardian. It's about you showing that interest, et cetera. I guarantee you most administrators will be a lot more willing to work with you in that manner. Next slide. One of the things that does get overlooked sometimes, and part of this is we understand you are very busy at this time of year and you have a lot of schoolwork to get through and exams coming up, et cetera. But the criteria of specific scholarships are very, as Rowena had said earlier, very closely tied to admissions. And the whole process itself, the selection process, the rubric that you're going to be evaluated from are the specific criteria of those scholarships. The Morehead-Cain and the Jefferson Scholarship, we have similarities in our criteria, but they're not 100% the same. And so you want to make sure that you know and understand what that criteria is. As an example, one of a shared criteria for us is leadership. It's a very broad and not specifically defined opportunity for you or criteria for you. So it gives you an opportunity to evaluate leadership for yourself as a part of the process and how you describe yourself in the application and the interviews, and know that there are no formulas to that. So take advantage of those opportunities to lean into how you interpret the criteria as well. Leadership doesn't mean you have to be the head boy or head girl at your school or a student body president or the captain of a team. But there are different ways that you can be involved. And what we're looking for is how you, from your experiences and context, connect to those criteria throughout the process itself. Next slide, Rowena. So in terms of the application, because you know there's that context and the criteria and the rubric, take advantage of the opportunities given during the application essays to describe yourself within the context of some of those criteria. As an example, for the Jefferson Scholarship nomination, there's an area where you get to describe 5 activities. And we ask in the prompts to take the opportunity within those activities to describe your leadership experience, if there is any in that realm, or how it helped you from a citizenship or a scholarship standpoint. So as an example, if you said, I am a field hockey player, as one of your top 5 activities, and the result was your response was, I played field hockey on the team for 3 years. That doesn't give us any depth or context or how field hockey related to any of our criteria. We can make assumptions, but it's a missed opportunity for you to say, I learned a lot about teamwork and leadership during difficult moments, et cetera. So take full advantage of those prompts when provided to convey your story and how the criteria have connected with you. As always, for all of these tidbits and recommendations that you'll get from Rowena and Henry and myself, balance is the key. You know yourself best. Describe yourself unapologetically, but also be careful how much you lean into the process itself. If you're starting off your essays for the Morehead-Cain or the Jefferson Scholars Program with quotes from John Motley Morehead or Thomas Jefferson, it's likely wasted space. It has to be a really strong presence for you and an idea and strategy. And we would rather see more stories about yourself and how you, giving you a chance to describe yourself to a group that's looking for, from a 2-dimensional representation of yourself, a more full picture. And next slide, Rowena. And then sometimes the processes themselves do have an opportunity for an interview at the end of the, or type groups interviews, et cetera. Everything that applies to the application itself in terms of criteria and describing yourself, that all plays the same and will all be positive in your ultimate presentation of yourself. But one thing about the interview, it's also a great opportunity for you to take a more conversational approach and really drive in some of the anecdotes. That creates it as a more personal connection to the interviewer and an opportunity for you. You'll be feeling more comfortable about the approach, and it drives the interview oftentimes into a direction about how you interact specifically with the criteria and limits the opportunities for specifically just your response to the current events of the day, et cetera. If you're giving them more anecdotes, typically the follow-on questions might have more of a personal flavor to yourself, which you should be able to answer better than anybody else. Remember, there's no right or wrong answer, but complete answers with depth are a differentiator. So if somebody asks you a question and your answer is yes, that's not going to give them much information. And again, balance is always key. If they ask you one question and you have a 25-minute interview and you've taken 20 minutes to answer the single question, they're not going to get a lot of the breadth of your application or experience. So just try to be yourself and don't make any false pretenses or try to say things that you think they want to hear. I can tell you everybody who gets involved in these types of processes, from those who are paid to help facilitate it to those who volunteer to help make them happen, they're really just interested in getting to know you a little bit more and hoping that they can showcase their university as a potential destination for you. And whatever the results are of any of these selection processes, as Rowena described earlier, they're highly competitive, but it's a great growing experience for you. And everybody that you meet through the process, even if you end up not having the scholarship at the end, is a great individual to reach out to, because they've been invested in you already. They've gotten to know you, and you're starting to build your network outside of those individuals that you have seen in the first 17 or 18 years of your life. So never discount what that process and the time people put into this could mean to you down the road. And I think next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about the Jefferson Scholarship itself. So the Jefferson Scholars Foundation is a merit-based scholarship, is an endowed merit-based scholarship program connected with the University of Virginia. We are completely independent of the university. We're a separate 501c3 nonprofit, but we exist to serve the university by helping attract outstanding individuals to the university. The scholarship itself is a full cost of attendance to the University of Virginia, and that's renewable for over 4 years, all 4 years. In addition to the stipend that you can receive, it's a full enrichment program that is provided as a supplemental experience to what we think is a great education at the University of Virginia. It includes unpaid internship stipends, a chance to study abroad, both during the summer, as well as a program at Oxford, a team building program, a leadership development seminar, career mentoring, enrichment speakers, and seed funding for either business ideas or student organizations that you would like to fund, and access to the Jefferson Scholars Foundation network. So it's a robust offering that really allows you to tailor what your experience wants to be. There's no specific time when these things occur, but you can craft what that experience looks like for you as a Jefferson Scholar afterwards. Every accredited UK school can nominate up to 2 students in their graduating year. The key component here is that your school must nominate you. You must be in your finishing year in the UK, and your school will be nominating you forward into our process. The nominations and the forms must be submitted by December 1st. And the regional interviews typically are held in London for the UK, occur sometime in January or February. And then we will invite a select number of students from those regional interviews to a final weekend in March. And we notify the recipients of the Jefferson Scholarship by the 3rd week in March. The criteria for the Jefferson Scholarship is scholarship, citizenship, and leadership. And those are the sole criteria. We don't consider financial need or your prior interest in the University of Virginia as factors in the decision process itself. It's a great opportunity for you to look forward and think about what you might look forward and say where you want your university experience to be. And the Jefferson Scholars Foundation is simply just trying to help everybody reach their full potential in the areas of scholarship, leadership, and citizenship. Thank you so much, Rowena.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ben, for that overview of both the process, but also thinking about the Jefferson Scholars Foundation. I'm now going to hand over to Henry, who is going to talk a little bit about the Morehead-Cain Scholarship and the opportunities that it offers to you. I'll just say at this point as well, if you have any questions, either generally or about specific if you have any questions, please do use the Q&A function, and we'll be taking questions at the end. Thank you. Over to you, Henry.
Thank you very much. So I'll start by saying that I thought Ben's overview of the sort of application and how to go about it was fantastic, and there's an awful lot to be learned there. A couple of points that particularly resonated for me that I thought I might just emphasise is that I think all of the sort of merit scholarships, but other scholarships as well, are looking for depth of experience. We're not expecting people to be Superman or Superwoman to have done all of everything, but I think certainly we from the Morehead-Cain, and I think most of the other scholarships that we are in touch with, are looking for impacts and outcomes. And that's always, I think, a good way to think about how you plan your application, whether it's a written application and indeed an interview. You need to think about things where you've really had an impact, and then you need to describe what you've done and what outcomes you've achieved, because ultimately, and I'm sure it's the same for Jefferson, what we're looking for in the Morehead-Cain is people that we think are going to really make an impact and really kind of drive outcomes during their 4 years as an undergraduate at UNC or indeed UVA as well. So I think that's a good way of thinking about it. And you can plan interviews. Obviously, you don't know what questions you're going to get asked, but you can plan around thinking about your key experiences and how you want to kind of weave those into the narrative about who you are and how you go about your life. And one thing I say to people when they ask me, how do I prepare for an interview? And this might sound trite, but I think, put yourselves in the interviewer's shoes. You might be seeing a large number of hugely talented young people, in a day, in several days. And I often think it's a good idea to think about the 3 or 4 things that you really want those interviewers to remember about you. What makes you tick? What impacts are you really going to have? And if you just think about how to weave those into your answers, into your examples that you give for your experiences, I think that's a good way to sort of prepare yourself for the process. So I'll use that as a segue into sort of a brief summary about the Morehead-Cain Scholarship to make sure we've got plenty of time for Q&A. Founded by John Motley Morehead III, it's specific to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which is, I think we can all agree, it's a very similar sort of institution to UVA. They're 2 of the oldest state universities in the country. I think there's a constant debate about which one's actually older, but they are top state universities where you will have an incredibly diverse and rich experience, both from an academic perspective, but also all the other things you get to do. And that's really, I think, what the scholarships are about. We want people that are going to, really engage in all aspects of the university. The criteria here for Morehead-Cain Scholarship, which I think is very similar, we're looking for people that are not just sort of, demonstrated high academic performance, but people that we think are really going to grow into the sort of academic opportunities that the university offers. Leadership, as Ben said, it's on one level, it's an incredibly broad characteristic, but it's something that I think, people that have it, manage to sort of describe how they lead and the impacts, I use that word again, the impacts they have on other people, on situations around them. And again, I think, a sort of piece of advice I often give to people, a lot of people will have plenty of leadership opportunities at school, but also I think you want to look beyond school, other ways in which you might have, demonstrated leadership or impacted, the broader community where you live, are also interesting things to think about. Moral force of character, you can probably tell that this was written in 1945, as it says, but when we talk about character, I often sort of simplify that by saying that we're looking for people that have an opinion, that have got an opinion about key issues of the day, about life, about how they lead their life, and about how the world evolves around us, and that are going to be able to express that in a way that is sensitive and thinking about other people around them and institutions that they're in. Again, a little bit vague, but I think it's you probably know if you've got it, and it sort of defines itself through interesting and rich experiences. And then last but not least, physical vigor. We often have fantastic athletes, but that's not what this requires. We are looking for people, though, that, sort of have demonstrated a commitment to an active lifestyle, in the world around them. So those are the criteria. We take for Morehead-Cain between 70 and 80 scholars each year. Roughly almost a third of those now will typically be international students, of which we usually have about 4 from the UK each year. So if we go to the next slide. So describing what the scholarship is, it's a 4-year merit-based scholarship to the UNC at Chapel Hill or Carolina. And that covers the full cost of attendance, tuition, student fees, housing, meals, books, and all that good stuff. And then I think the thing that sets a lot of these great scholarships apart, is the summer enrichment program. There are 4 summers that we particularly focus on the Morehead-Cain. The first one is outdoor leadership, which is typically a chance to go on an outward bound course or a NOLS course, which is really focusing on developing leadership characteristics, understanding the way you lead already and the way you might kind of build on that, as well as teamwork in what is typically both a sort of fantastic but also a challenging environment in the outdoors. The second summer is called Civic Collaboration. And this one we've evolved over the years, and the format now is that typically small groups of scholars will go to a city, typically in the US, but not exclusively in the US, and look to take on a project to really kind of develop a form of civic collaboration in that community. And again, the impact here is very much around both planning what you're going to do and how that's going to be able to impact the community, but then also really kind of trying to measure outcomes and really sort of demonstrate the impact that you've had. So then the third and fourth summers, so global perspective is all around the opportunity to go and travel somewhere, anywhere I should say, in the world. Typically people will, scholars will kind of use this to kind of enhance their studies. It comes at the end of your junior year. You'll often be, well into what you call a major subject there. You might be looking at doing an honours thesis, and but that doesn't have to be the case. That's what a lot of people do. And then last but not least, you have the professional experience, which is all about an opportunity to try, some form of professional work experience in a profession that you might want to go on and apply to as you come to the end of your university experience. All of those are completely funded as well. And then in addition to that, there are a number of other sort of optional funding opportunities that exist. People can take a gap year, there's study abroad, up to $20,000 for study abroad, and then a discovery fund, which is effectively an opportunity to go and pitch an idea to the foundation that can really be about anything. I mean, again, it will be an extension to some of the study that you're doing, but not necessarily. And again, to sort of ask for a grant of money to go and do that. I think the key thing I would say, and kind of summing up about Morehead-Cain, is that as I said at the beginning, we're looking for people that are really going to have an impact and deliver interesting outcomes around the University of North Carolina. It's often said that you can often not tell who Morehead-Cains are, who the scholars are. There's no special uniform, or you don't have to wear a badge. But what you can often tell when you've been there a while is that almost all of the scholars that succeed in making it onto the program do incredible things while they're at the university. And I think that's it's all about being sort of self-starting, about wanting to experience something very different, particularly if you're coming from the UK. It is a very different experience to go to the college in the States. But having done it myself, albeit a long time ago, it is that difference, if you like, that makes it amazing. And the last thing I would like to say, which again I think draws back to a point that Ben made, you might be sitting here thinking, having listened to the two of us talk about these amazing scholarships, oh my God, it's too difficult, it's almost intimidating. Don't be intimidated, because yes, they're competitive, but they're absolutely achievable for the right people that have got the right sort of energy and enthusiasm to really go and do something very different, which it is if you're coming from this country, and to embrace the experience and to succeed while you do it. So if you think you've got some of these experiences and abilities that fit with the criteria, do apply, because it really could be for you. And do not be intimidated, because there is such a broad range of people on all of these scholarships, and they are absolutely life-changing experiences. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to both of you for presenting there about both the process, but also about 2 specific examples of external scholarships. And there are lots of opportunities out there open to British students, and just hearing about some of the incredible opportunities that are available makes me wish I could go and apply back to college all over again. So we're now going to move into our question and answer session. If you have any questions, either generally about the process or specifically for Henry or Ben, please feel free to pop them into the Q&A box, and we'll be working through those as they come in. I've got a couple of questions that I'm going to ask perhaps both of you to maybe comment on just to get started. So both of you have talked about these amazing opportunities that come with the general scholarship to be a student on a US campus. I don't know if either of you can think of perhaps some examples of specific examples from British students who have come on the scholarship and use those opportunities, maybe giving us a couple of examples perhaps. I don't know who wants to go first, if you yeah.
I'm sorry, Rowena, you cut out a little bit. You're looking
sorry.
for examples of...
So of a British student who's maybe used the scholarship and come and made the most of perhaps those extra examples outside of just the kind of studying process. So I don't know if there are any examples to be given.
Yeah, I'll start with the Jefferson side. We've had a number of students who came through from the UK. We generally average 1 to 2 students from the UK in every 1 to 2 years at the Jefferson Scholars Program. And for a number of years now, it's been a relatively young program. We don't have the length of time that the Morehead-Cain has had in the UK, but from our first graduates, the involvement, we had the student editor, the chief editor of the student newspaper was one of the first students from the UK in our process. In that same cohort of individuals, the student who won for the first time ever as an international student at the University of Virginia, essentially the award that's given to the best all-around student at the University of Virginia for their final year of study. So we've had individuals who have had lasting impact through philanthropy initiatives that they've tried to start, and being involved from our student self-governance initiatives at the University of Virginia through the Honor Committee and University Judiciary Committee. And then they also take advantage of the travel abroad experiences that are provided. And they traveled the world and saw areas that they had not had an opportunity to see yet. But it really does give you, as Henry was talking about earlier, this platform and opportunity to really take advantage of and explore not only your academic interests, but the things that you've already demonstrated through this point in time in your education of the civics and leadership that are going to allow you to have the most impact on the communities wherever you might land. But we've had a great record of success with students from the UK as Jefferson Scholars.
Yeah, and I mean, I can echo all of that. I mean, again, it's, say Morehead has been going for some time. I think the British program has been going since 1968 or something like that. Anyway, there's a good number of, alumni. And in fact, I'm sure both of us would mention kind of what an important part of the whole sort of aspect of these scholarships, the alumni network, is both obviously for the university, but specifically to the scholars and the scholarships. So just thinking about one person in particular that I've had something to do with recently, there was a young man that came through our process, went to UNC, had a fantastic time and used his summers in quite an interesting way, I think, in that he did an outward bound course in Alaska, which was amazing. He then did the civic collaboration piece down in Texas, near a community near the Mexico-Texas border, with a very interesting project looking at kind of water and, in desert communities, how you manage water. And then in his travel, or I suppose the study, the summer where he then went to travel, he was down in Ecuador, again, looking at kind of working with UNICEF down there on another project based around kind of water and resources in a sort of rural community there. And then came back and did investment banking internship, for sort of the final summer, thinking, which one of those am I going to do? And depending on your views on these things, the good news is he's back in Ecuador. But I think kind of bringing all those things together, but I give you an example of the huge kind of variety that you can do. But also in that case, the way you really can sort of use those summers to, investigate or experiment, if you like, with kind of different things that you might want to do after your time in university. And again, I think as Ben said, we've had a British student body president recently at Chapel Hill, which is a first. And I think people, get involved in all aspects of the university. And I think the thing I might just say about the summers, just to sort of close on the question, is that the ethos around the summers at Morehead-Cain is very much that, it is up to you to design your own program. There are particular experiences that, that people might have done before, relationships that the foundation will have with different communities, or, particularly say for the private end, for the professional experience piece. There are things that the foundation can do to help, but it is very much, your opportunity to design something that really works for you, and that helps you, build your experience.
Fantastic, thank you so much. I've got 2 questions that I'm going to add together. Rob was asking, how many applicants from the UK do each of the scholarships get per year? And have you had any successful Scottish scholars? in your program. So Henry, I don't know if you want to go first.
Yeah, I mean, application number is sort of, it's a tricky one in a way. I mean, we sort of try and keep the exact numbers. Well, we don't release the exact numbers, but I mean, I think it's safe to say that we are roughly not quite at the same sort of ratio that the foundation is in the US, but we would look to interview sort of 14 or 15 people in the UK as a sort of first select, and then we send 4 candidates from that 14 to interview at what they call finals weekend, which is the final selection weekend. There's also an extra, I suppose, an additional step in our process. We have a written application, and then we do these sort of short video answers, which I think, again, that's a good example of Ben was talking about. Be careful what you hear about that, because we've been doing it for a few years. We think it's very useful. But the whole point is that you can't prepare. Well, I say you can't prepare for that. You don't know what's coming. It's a good example about how don't just talk to people that did it last year. But I mean, we probably, I'm just trying to do the maths here. I mean, we're probably looking to interview in the region of, what is that? Somewhere between 1 in 5, 1 in 10 of the applications we get.
Great. And any Scottish scholars?
Absolutely, yeah. We have a good long history of Scottish scholars. British, we're all British obviously at the moment. But yes, I think and again, if that's of particular interest to people, we can absolutely connect people with Scottish alumni. And in fact, there are, and indeed, additional current scholars as well.
Ben?
And we have similar numbers in terms of, somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 interviews will occur, and then in the UK region, and then we'll send anywhere from 2 to 3 of those individuals to the finals weekend and that ranges from year to year, and sometimes it can be a little bit more as well. There's also an opportunity to get involved through the process if you're a student who applies directly through the early action round to the university's School of Engineering, the School of Architecture, the School of Nursing as well, to potentially be brought in through an admissions pool is another way that a student from the UK could be involved in our process if it wasn't a direct application from the school or nomination. I recommend all of you go talk to your counselors about their nomination process for the Jefferson process itself. In terms of Scottish students, I believe this is from straight memory over the last 10 years. I think we've had 3 or 4 individuals, and as Henry said, we'd be happy to connect you to them with their specific experiences, and some who are still living there, who are now living there again, as well as some who have gone to other areas of the world at this point.
Fantastic, thank you. Another question from Harry. Can an individual with dual US-UK citizenship apply to a scholarship like this?
Happy to go first on that. I mean, it's a good question. It is one we get. The simple answer is yes. The way for Morehead-Cain, the way we like to approach that is that we like our British applicants, the people that apply for the scholarship through the British process, to be in their sort of secondary education in this country. It's fine to have dual citizenship. It's fine to actually hold US citizenship, but you do need to be completing your secondary schooling, basically doing A-levels here in the UK. And I think that's kind of it's an informal rule, because I think we feel if you're in school elsewhere, there's another avenue through which you can apply to the scholarship. But one other thing I might say, and Ben sort of triggered this from his last answer, we also have a sort of a network of partner schools which are schools that have nominated people over the years. But we take direct applications from anybody in the UK that wants to apply. And so again, if your school is not a partner school, don't worry about that. You just need to contact the foundation as part of making your application, and they can verify that your school is a school, and it'll be fine.
Great. We've got some general questions about scholarships more generally, which I'll come on to and answer probably fairly quickly towards the end. I have another question to both of you as we finish up in these last few minutes. Are there any mistakes that you see British students making over and over again in terms of their applications to your scholarships, especially when you compare them to American students? Ben, I don't know if you want to go first.
Yeah, I'll go first. I don't see any specific to UK students, other than the one aspect is giving context, especially if you come to the final weekend of the Jefferson Scholarship process, for example. It's not immediately clear to everybody in the US what some of the individuals who might be interviewing you, what the gold and silver award are, for instance, in the UK, or any school specific awards that you've won. So when you have an opportunity to list your awards and honors, giving some context to what does that award mean? It's clear I've gotten the calculus award. We know what that's associated with, but you know, the Rowena award for X, we need to know what the context is. So that might be the best way to help strengthen your application process. And then the other thing that I would say in general for all of your collegiate applications is remember, if given an opportunity for a prompt, being as specific and personal as possible, that the experience and what you're writing about is about you and your experiences, is the most important step. You know, whether it goes in waves, you know, a question about, you know, what's the greatest threat to the generation? And if you talk about social media or global warming, there are a lot of students writing about those same issues. So make sure you have a personal bent to whatever your response might be in the application itself.
I think all of that is very good advice. I think the one other thing I might say, which is sort of borrowing from something I had on his slides, and I'll take it further, but I like the expression you used, which is, you know, talk about yourself unapologetically. And from a sort of cultural perspective, we sometimes sort of half joking but half serious say particularly to the people that we're sending from the UK to finals weekend, you know, don't go in with the British Reserve thing, because it doesn't always play so well, you know. And I think again, you can see I'm half joking, but I'm also serious in that I think, you know, we do find some of our finalist candidates, if you like, we might give them a little bit of coaching on just how to be, you know, that bit more direct and frankly do the things that Ben just described. You know, be unapologetic about yourself, give context, and really sell yourself, because at that stage, you know, everybody that's on those finals weekends, everybody could get the scholarship. And yeah, it is slightly, you know, you don't want to be scrapping past people, but I mean, you do want to make sure that you leave as good a possible impression of yourself as you can. And sometimes we do say to the Brits, you know, don't sit back and wait for other people to assume that you're brilliant.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.